All right, gang, tonight the seals start to break. This is the part of the book of Revelation that most people come for when they want to study the book of Revelation. So, and that starts tonight, and it's not going to let up until we get to chapter 19, and we see the final bowl judgment, and then Armageddon, and then we have the millennial kingdom, and then the new heaven and the new earth. From this point on, it's about as exciting as you can imagine, or at least to me it is. And you wouldn't be attending a Thursday night Bible study if you didn't feel the same way I did. So let's pray tonight. Lord, I thank you for my brothers and sisters on the call tonight, Lord. I pray, Lord, that in this session, I pray that we would see your name exalted. Lord, I ask that you would be magnified. I pray, Lord, that you would become big and I become small. Lord, I thank you for the word you've given us. Help me now, Lord, as I break it apart. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so here we go. We're going to finish chapter 5, which we ended last week. We finished verse 8. So we're ready for verse 9. And they sang a new song saying, "Worthy are you to take the book and to break its seals." Now this is all about Jesus. Remember, John's in the throne room. He saw what looked to him like a deed or a last will and testament. And he knew it was one of the two. I believe it turns out to be the title deed to the earth because God's taking it back. And then John started to weep, if you remember, because it seemed like nobody was stepping up to break the seals and start reading the document so that the redemption plan is consummated. So John had a good idea what was in the hands of the one on the throne. So, and then the Lamb from the tribe of Judah, who is also described as the Lion of Judah, stood up. And it was an odd-looking lamb, but it turns out it can be none other than Jesus Christ himself. So when they say, "Worthy you to take the book and to break its seals, for you were slain and purchased for God with your blood from every tribe, tongue, and people and nation." That's pretty definitive. It's got to be Jesus. Verse 10, "You have made them to be a kingdom and priests to our God, and they will reign upon the earth." Then I looked, and I heard the voice of many angels around the throne, and the living creatures and the elders, and the number of them was myriads of myriads and thousands of thousands, saying with one loud voice, "Worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing." And every creature, every created thing which is in heaven or on the earth or under the earth and on the sea and all things in them, I heard saying, "To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb," so that would be to God the Father and God the Son, "to him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory, dominion forever and ever." And the four living creatures, you remember those creations, the four living creatures kept saying, "Amen." And then the elders get involved and they fall down and worship the one on the throne. It's just a magnificent scene, and they all sense something big is going to happen. So verses 9 to 14 describe the celebration that will break out in heaven when John's vision becomes a reality. From John's perspective, remember, he's an old man. He's exiled to the Isle of Patmos. Domitian put him there, the Roman Caesar, for preaching the gospel. And he's suffering, and he knows the church is suffering. And he's wondering, I know Jesus promised to come back. Is he coming? When is he coming? I can't, there's no indication that he has no hope that he's coming, but you have to kind of put yourself in the mind of John, the apostle. He was very young when Jesus left. It's been about 60 years since Jesus ascended from the Mount of Olives. John has been through a lot in that time. And while he probably never doubted Jesus would come back, he probably did wonder how much worse things had to be before Jesus returned. You remember that Jesus gave his apostles, his disciples, instructions about what it would be like prior to his return. And John's looking around and seeing, yeah, I think it's all happening now, wars and rumors of wars and famines and earthquakes. So John is ready, as are the host of heaven as well, because the host of heaven joins in this celebration. They're excited about it too. Well, after this vision, you can bet that the timing no longer mattered to John, because God had given him a very vivid vision, the certainty of Jesus' claim of, I will come again. So now that John has seen it in this vision, I'm sure he took great solace in that. And it becomes quite clear from the rest of the chapter that we're not the only ones who, along with God, who long for God to take back the earth, set things right, and begin again without sin. There are many days when I utter the words, I hate sin. Every time I hear of a disease that struck somebody, or some horrible accident, or a crime against them, or a marriage breaking up, I put it in perspective. Sin is the root cause of all that. So you can hear me saying many days, I hate sin. And I long for the day when Jesus does come back and sets everything right, so that all the wrongs will be corrected. And that, like the fairy tale story, they lived happily ever after, that really is our destiny. We will live happily ever after. And then the living creatures and the 24 elders and the thousands and thousands of angels are basically breaking out in this chorus of praise for the Lamb, when they say, worthy is the Lamb. And he's described as one who can only be Jesus. Now, I haven't had this drawing up for a few weeks. I just thought I'd pop this up here quickly tonight to remind us all. The red arrow tells us where we are on God's redemption timeline. And it started back in Nehemiah chapter 2, when the command went forth to rebuild the wall in Jerusalem. This will be after the Babylonian captivity. Israel's coming out of the captivity they've been in for 70 years. And the command goes forth to rebuild the wall. And then the timeline flows from there. So we are over here. We are in this last 7-year period of history in John's vision. You and I aren't there yet. I mean, I don't expect we will ever get here, because I believe that this event here, the rapture, is going to take place, then followed by the Great Tribulation. But as far as John's vision goes, this is where we are. We are at the beginning of the last 7 years of Earth's history. Now, chapter 6 begins with Jesus, the Lion of Judah and the Lamb of God, opening the first seal in the scroll that was in the Father's hand. So chapter 5 is over. There were no chapters and verses in John's vision. That was added later. We now flow into chapter 6. And we're going to see the opening of the first seal in the scroll. So this chapter will take us all the way through the first 6 seals. And what is not obvious without reading the rest of the book is that the 7 seals encompass the whole period of the 7 years. And I think I have a drawing of that for you coming up to make it more clear. Within the 7th seal are contained all the trumpet and bowl judgments. Okay, so what happens is seal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are broken, and those judgments come out. And then when the 7th seal is broken, the breaking of the 7th seal, out of the breaking of the 7th seal comes the 7 trumpet judgments. And then when the 7th trumpet sounds, out of that comes the 7 bowl judgments. So this is like, I don't know if you've ever seen a Matryoshka doll from Russia, where you have a little figure and you can take it apart. Inside, there's another figure just like it, but a little smaller. Then you take that one apart, and there's another figure inside it, just like the one before it, but a little smaller. It goes down maybe 4 or 5 levels. So out of the seals comes the trumpets, out of the trumpets come the bowls. Now, there's a drawing that kind of puts it in perspective. So this drawing represents the whole tribulation. That's the span of 7 years. Notice the timing though. Okay, so these are the seal judgments right here, where it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to have the 4 horses, then vengeance, and I'm trying to remember I forget what the 6th one is. But then that takes us to the midpoint of the tribulation. And what happens at the midpoint of the tribulation is that is the exact time when the beast or the Antichrist, remember the Bible doesn't refer to the Antichrist in Revelation, it refers to the beast. It's the same person. That's where the beast has an image of himself made and set up inside the Holy of Holies in the rebuilt temple in Jerusalem. So there's a lot in there, what I just said. So what has to happen is, right now there is no temple in Jerusalem. It was destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans, completely flattened. In what we learn as we read through the book of Revelation, that there's sacrifices going on in the tribulation period. And the Jews aren't doing sacrifices today because they don't have a temple. So what that means is a new temple will have to be built. So it's assumed that there's a temple. And so we have the first 6 trumpets sounding off and those judgments being delivered. And then at the exact midpoint, this is where things really start to turn for the worse. This is bad over here, the first 3.5 years of the tribulation. And we're going to go through all at least the first 4 tonight. This is very bad territory. But when Antichrist sets up his image to be worshipped and demands that it be worshipped, that's when things really get dicey for the Christian. And then what out of that comes the 7 trumpets. They're right down here in this line. And that's all kinds of judgments on Earth's ecosystem, the planets above. I mean, it's water. I mean, it's devastating. And then you have the 7th trumpet. Then out of the 7th trumpet comes the 7 bowls. And what we'll find is that the 7 bowls are a lot like the 7 trumpets, except much worse. We'll read about one of the trumpets where 1/3 of the earth's fresh water turned to blood. When we get to the 7 bowls, we'll read where all the fresh water turned to blood. So these are kind of a precursor to where God is going in the 7 bowls. And so as you go through the tribulation, it takes 3.5 years for the first 6 seals, but then it takes maybe 2 years or 2.5 years for the 7 trumpets. And the bowls really can't be drawn to scale because I think the bowls might happen in as short a period of time as a week, because they're going to come bam, 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 bam. So that's kind of an overview of where the book goes. Now, this is indicative of chapter 6. We're going to look at this false peace. That's the white horse. We're going to look at war. That's the red horse. We're going to look at famine. That's the black horse. We're going to look at death. That's the ashen colored horse, or the pale horse. And then the 5th seal is vengeance. We'll talk about that. And the 6th seal is fear. And remember, out of the 7th seal comes the 7 trumpets. So this is technically actually only 6 judgments, but I don't want to minimize their impact. Okay, so we begin reading in chapter 6. John says, "Then I saw when the Lamb broke one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures saying as with a loud voice of thunder, 'Come.' I looked, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer." Now, just make one quick note here, and that is, notice the rider on the white horse has a bow, but no arrows. Odd, isn't it? He's got a crown, and he went out conquering to conquer without any weapons. That's odd. That never happens. Verse 3, when he broke the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd living creature saying, "Come." And another, a red horse, went out, and to him who sat on it, it was granted to take peace from the earth, and that men would slay one another, and a great sword was given to him. When he broke the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature saying, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. So there's the first 3 horses in that text right there. And then verse 6 says this, "And I heard something like a voice in the center of the 4 living creatures saying, 'A quart of wheat for a denarius.'" A denarius would be, it's money, it'd be equivalent to a day's wages. So a quart of wheat for a day's wages. Man, that's some heavy duty inflation. That's some expensive food. If food's that expensive, you can bet people aren't going to be able to buy much of it. So there's going to be a lot of famine and starvation. And and then 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. Okay, so how can you get 3 quarts of barley for a denarius with only 1 quart of wheat? It has to do with quality. In first century Palestine, if you had money, you wouldn't buy barley to make bread, you'd buy wheat. So wheat's much more expensive. So a quart of wheat for a denarius or 3 quarts of barley for a denarius to make it stretch further. And do not damage the oil and the wine. Now people have wondered what that phrase means. Don't damage the oil and the wine. Well, the oil and the wine is like the grain. It's expensive. So don't waste it. Don't spill it. That's the warning there. Verse 7. When the Lamb broke the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come." And I looked, and behold, an ashen horse, and he who sat on it had the name Death, and Hades was following with him. Authority was given to them over 1/4 of the earth to kill with sword and with famine and with pestilence and by wild beasts on the earth. That is interesting. Authority was given them to over 1/4 of the earth. That sounds like 25% of the earth's population is going to die. They're going to be killed with the sword, with famine, pestilence, which would be disease. Diseases that would come from unsanitary conditions, cholera, those kind of things, dysentery, and then also by wild beasts on the earth. So the first 4 seals cover the first 3.5 years of Daniel's 70th week. And it's at the midpoint that Antichrist declares he is God and demands worship. Up until that point, we had this false peace going on. And in that false peace, the earth was, the infrastructure around the world was being repaired from what happened after the rapture. And the Antichrist was, for lack of a better term, forming a new United Nations. He's going to be a brilliant leader, and he's indwelt by Satan. Satan is not stupid. Going to be a brilliant leader, very charismatic, so people will follow him. And for a while, he will allow the world's religions to go on as they have. But up until 3.5 years, at the 3.5 year point, he makes his play at that point where he wants to be worshipped. Remember, he's indwelt. The beast, Antichrist, is indwelt by Satan. Satan got kicked out of heaven because he wanted to be worshipped. He wanted to be God. So what he does here is he goes into the temple, places an image of himself there, and demands that people worship the beast. And that's where the 666 comes in. We won't get to that to chapter 13, but we will get there. That's where the 666 comes in. And that's where a lot of Christians will die because they won't take the mark of the beast, nor will they bow down to the beast. If you remember back in the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Nebuchadnezzar had this giant image he wanted them to worship. And they said, "Oh, king, look, we're not going to worship him. You can throw us into the furnace. If we die, it's okay. And if the Lord saves us, that's okay too." That was their mindset. So what happens in the end times won't be the first time that it happened. And then Daniel 9:27 reads like this: "And he will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week." Well, the he in this case is the beast or the Antichrist. So he's going to make a firm covenant with many for 1 week. That the 1 week in Daniel's vision would equate to 7 years. But in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. Well, where did that happen? That happened in the temple. So halfway through the middle of the week, 3.5 years into the Great Tribulation, he'll put a stop to all what he thinks is poppycock with the Judaism and their sacrificial system. And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate. He's going to desecrate the temple. And even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed is poured out on the one who makes desolate. So inside Daniel's prophecy, there is a prophecy about the destruction of the beast and the devil with him. It just takes time to work it out. And then we read the 5th seal produces the martyrs who refuse to worship the beast of Daniel 9 and Matthew 24. So the 5th seal is right around the midpoint of the Great Tribulation. I'll just roll this back here for a second. This is the 5th seal, and it's right around the midpoint of the tribulation. So it's close. Now, Matthew 24. This is a text we need to read in now into our study because the events here are referenced. In Matthew 24, is part of that's part of the text that we call the Olivet Discourse. And I'll just read it and then we'll talk a little bit about it. As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" Well, the reason for the question is Jesus had just told his disciples, he said, "See all those buildings? They're going to be knocked down. Not one stone will be left upon another." So they said, "Tell us when these things will be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" So Jesus answered them, "See that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name saying, 'I am the Christ.' And they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there'll be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pangs." So Jesus is prophesying on the Mount of Olives about the time that John is now seeing in his vision. And there's a lot of, I'll show you in a few minutes, there's a lot of synergy between Matthew 24 and the Revelation chapter 6 and 7. So that's what Jesus said. So the sixth, which would be the sixth seal, is also right about the midpoint of the tribulation. And that is, out of the sixth seal comes the seven trumpets. Oh, pardon me. Out of the sixth seal was fear. So this is also right about the midpoint of the 7 years, and the seventh seal spans the second half of the tribulation, meaning that, I'm going to roll this back here to my drawing again. The seals go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up to the midpoint. Then out of the seventh seal comes the trumpets and the bowls. So you can see that the seals actually cover all 7 years of the last week. So just an interesting sidelight there. In fact, Jesus calls the early troubles in Matthew 24 birth pangs, for in verse 8 we read, "But all these are merely the beginning of birth pangs." Okay, so when a woman is ready to have a baby, she will start to get birth pains. And of course, they start timing them and how much time between this contraction and the next contraction. So birth pains or labor pains point to and signal a big event. And as the event gets closer and closer, the labor pains intensify and come in more rapid succession. This is an apt description of the seals, trumpets, and bowls. And I'll roll this back one more time, and then I'll probably stop rolling it back. But you can see that if these are but the beginning of birth pains back here, as you get closer to the event, they become more intense. Remember I said here that one of these says a third of the earth's fresh water will turn to be turned to blood. They get more intense. If you get to the bowls over here, all of the earth's fresh water gets turned to blood. So these come faster and more intense as the big event approaches. Most of mankind has thought for years that the world is heading for a massive war known as Armageddon. Yeah, you can find people on almost every street corner. If you would ask them, "Hey, do you know about Armageddon?" There's a high probability they're going to have some sense of what Armageddon might point to. Now, the sense that they have is probably not biblically accurate, but a few would have it right. But people know it's something bad. They know it's something decisive, something out in the future that is like the biggest turning point in the world. And while that's true, it's also true that the world will first experience worldwide peace. So everyone, not everyone, I can't say everyone, a lot of people have a sense that we are right now on the verge of something big in our future. We don't know what it is, but these seems like unusual times. So Armageddon is out in our future. I don't know how far away, but one thing I do know, the rapture will take place, and then the Great Tribulation will start. And for a while, things aren't going to be that bad. They're going to be bad because if you remember, the red horse is war and the black horse was death, a famine, and the pale horse was death. So all that stuff's bad, but it's nowhere near like it's going to be in the second half of the Great Tribulation. First of all, and the first thing they experience is worldwide peace. It's a false peace. Revelation 6:2, I looked and behold a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. Okay, so the rider on this horse is not Jesus; it's the Antichrist, coming with a very appealing idea: world peace. And how do we know it's not Jesus? Because the Greek word behind crown isn't the kind of crown that Jesus wears. It's a much lesser crown, and Jesus doesn't go out to conquer the world with a false peace. So, but the Antichrist goes out with this idea: hey, I'm going to bring peace. Everybody wants peace. If you've ever watched a Miss America or a Miss Universe pageant, and they say, "What if you could have anything you want? What would it be?" World peace. Well, this is what is going to happen in the end times. Antichrist is going to usher in a false peace. It's for his devices. People spend hours and hours trying to figure out who it is that rides this white horse, but few spend any time at all on the red, black, and pale horse riders. I don't know why that is, but everyone is intrigued by the rider on the white horse. It's the Antichrist. The rider on the white horse has a crown, not a diadem as Jesus wears. That was given to him given to him seemingly without a fight. So he gets this crown. He's in charge. He becomes the world leader without a fight of any kind. Remember, he had a bow, but no arrows. But somehow he's awarded victories, and he went out conquering to conquer. To me, it becomes obvious. His way to victory is he carries with him a very intoxicating idea, the idea of world peace. Who doesn't want world peace? Who wouldn't want that? So what is it about the rider on a white horse that makes him so successful at conquering without any weapons? As I just said, I believe it's the mere promise of world peace, and it will be delivered by Antichrist. He's saying, I can do it. Just give me a chance. Now, let me show you some slides from the internet. I Googled world peace, and if you Google world peace, you can find lots of organizations dedicated to the idea that man can live in universal peace with one another. That idea is flawed for this reason. Behind that idea is a worldview that says mankind is basically good. And that is not true. Mankind is basically not good. We are sinners by birth. Now, we can get a little bit deceived because there are some people that aren't as bad as others, and there's some people that on a comparative scale seem rather nice. Just remember, the standard is to be compared to Jesus. So the idea that we can have world peace without Christ, without God, it's flawed because mankind is not basically good. Now, here's one of the websites. I just put the Jeremiah 6:14 reference up there. They have healed the brokenness of my people, superficially saying, peace, peace, but there is no peace. Okay, so this first one is called World Peace is Possible. And then all kinds of things. They have news on their websites and different links you can go to. And then there's this one, the Peace Alliance. And if you look at the signs, the group down here is holding up. It sounds like a lot of the social justice issues that we see today: community peace building, peace in schools, justice systems, personal peace, international peace. Now, all of those are good ideas. All of those are good goals. The problem is when you try to do it without Christ, it's never going to happen. Never perfectly. Because the first thing that happens to these organizations is money starts to roll in. And money starts to roll in. People lose their noble goals, if you will, trying to get more money and make a life better for themselves. It's just the way we are. And then the next one says, do you believe peace is possible? We do. Together we can make it happen. It says in conflict areas worldwide, local people are building peace, stopping violence, saving lives, healing shattered communities. I hope that's true. I really do. And then it says thousands of people around the world have chosen to help them, to stand up for peace, and to show these local heroes they are not alone. Peace Direct helps them, and you can help them too. Of course, this is an appeal for money. And when the money starts rolling in, attitudes and things they do change. This one's an interesting one. It says, may peace prevail on earth. And I put a little red box around their mission statement down here, and you probably can't read it, but it's just big enough for me to read, so I will read it to you. Here's their mission statement. The power of thought. Thought forms create an energetic field strong enough to empower the course of planetary destiny. Now, if ever there was a well-constructed sentence that said nothing, it's that one. What is to empower the course of planetary destiny? Does anyone really know it? I've never heard of such a thing. And then the next paragraph says, the power of words. Words carry vibrations strong enough to inspire, heal, and transform the human heart, as well as the kingdom of plants and animals and all creations. Now, there is a bit of truth behind this. It says words carry the ability to transform a human heart. Yeah, the words of God do, but there's no reference here to God. So this, again, it's a well-constructed sentence. It sounds lofty, but it doesn't ring true, like it's relative or relevant. And then, of course, here's the Dalai Lama, a nice guy, I'm sure. Doesn't know Jesus, he's lost. But there, if you go to His Holiness, that's terrible. The website, you can see all kind of links to world peace, a human approach to world peace, human rights, democracy, and freedom, the reality of war, all those things. And then this one, I found this one too. I just clipped this out of an article. So this is the promise of world peace. In 1985, the Universal House of Justice addressed a message to the peoples of the world, inviting them to consider that a new social order can be fostered by all peoples, seeing themselves as members of one universal family. This message was presented to the world leaders and countless others during the United Nations International Year of Peace. Yeah, that was in October of 1985. The United Nations declared we'll have a time of international peace. Great. Did it last? No. Then the next paragraph, to the peoples of the world. This is one we should pay attention to. The great peace towards which people of goodwill throughout the centuries have inclined their hearts, of which seers and poets for countless generations have expressed their vision, and for which from age to age the sacred scriptures of mankind have constantly held the promise, is now at long last within the reach of the nations. This was back in 1985. I don't think they made it. For the first time in history, it is possible for everyone to view the entire planet. That's true. With all of its myriad diversified peoples in one perspective. World peace is not only possible, but inevitable. It is the next stage in evolution of this planet. In the words of one great thinker, the planetization of mankind. Again, I have no idea what the planetization of mankind means. A lot of what you find in this world peace movement is a lot of gobbledygook that sounds good, that you might want to put your money behind because it sounds like a good idea. I tend to believe I don't know if they start out being frauds, but I tend to believe that they're leading people astray because this is not possible apart from Christ. Okay, so when the rider in the white horse is awarded victories without any arrows and is given a crown, it's just maybe because the idea of world peace is so intoxicating. It is something everybody would like to have. It's like you can't be against it. You cannot be against world peace. But it'll be a reality for a short period of time. It'll be short-lived, and in fact, it's a deception. If you heard Pastor Shane's message on Sunday, he's talked about in the end times there'll be deception. Starts with a deception. Well, this is the white horse, and it's a deception. It's the devil incarnate riding on a white horse, proclaiming peace to the world. But it's not about peace for the world. It's about power and control for him. Jesus predicted the end would begin with a deception, and the false peace put together by Antichrist is just what the world is longing for. So that's why it can be so successful. If somebody promises and say they can deliver it, well, let's take a chance at least. Why won't we take a chance? Matthew 24:3, he was sitting on the Mount of Olives. The disciples came to him privately saying, tell us, when will these things happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? And Jesus answered and said to them, see to it that no one misleads you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and will mislead many. Yeah, so part of the deception early on in the Great Tribulation are false Christs, people who claim to be Jesus. And when really bad things start to happen, people will be much more open to something spiritual. It's just that not only will they be open to the gospel, they'll be open to other things that are spiritual, shall we say, as well. So it begins with the Great Deception. Our world is ripe for this very deception because the intellectual elites have been dreaming of a utopian society for years and years. Yeah, this would be the Bill Gateses of the world, where they actually believe that they're smarter than everybody else. And they talk about this, a one world government, one world currency. All that talk is not only is it a deception, they're bad ideas. They're bad ideas because the bigger any organization gets, the harder it is to keep it pure, and the easier it is to infect. So if there were, let's just say hypothetically, if there were one person over all the world today, and let's say that that person was a person of integrity and they wanted to govern the world well, all you have to do is corrupt one person and you corrupt the whole thing. So that's the weakness of a one world government. It's just, it'll never happen. Well, let me correct myself. It will happen in the last 7 years of Earth's history, but it won't be a good thing. This is a comparison here between Revelation 6 and Matthew 24. So you have a false peace in Matthew 24:4. You have a false peace in Revelation 6:2. You got a war. That's the second horse. That's the red horse in Matthew 24:6, and you got the red horse in Revelation 6:3. And then you have famine in Matthew 24:7. We see famine. In Revelation 6, verse 5, we see the third seal as well, the black horse, and that is famine. And then you have death. So that's Matthew 24:9 and Revelation 6:7. So all four horses and what they represent are found in both Matthew 24 and Revelation 6. Incidentally, if you're studying Matthew 24, don't try to find the rapture. It's not there. Matthew 24 is all about the tribulation. So Matthew 24 happens after the rapture. So Revelation 6:3, when he broke the second seal, I heard the second living creature saying, come. And another red horse went out, and to him who sat on it, it was granted to take peace from the earth, and that men would slay one another, and a great sword was given to him. So now you have the rider on the red horse going out to make war. You remember the rider on the white horse had a bow but no arrows. The rider on the red horse has a great sword given to him, so he's going to go out and make war. So again, we see one of the four living creatures before the throne involved in the coming judgment. Yeah, throughout the book of Revelation, I will probably point this out again, but throughout the book of Revelation, the angels of God are involved in the judgments, as are those three living creatures, the four living creatures, which are a rank of angel in themselves. So you have the angels in heaven involved in the judgment. This time you have another one of the four living creatures. This time the horse is red, and he is the horse of war, and the judgment on the earth is war. So this will be worldwide war. And this is what Antichrist, this is what comes from someone who promises to take over and give you peace. Inevitably, they give you the exact opposite. Remember, Jesus said the end would begin with a deception. The world peace was the first judgment because it set up the world for a big fall. Yeah, the rapture happened. The world was in total disarray. This brilliant, charismatic leader rises who says, I can fix all this, and starts to fix things, so they follow him. So he's the rider on the white horse. He comes promising a false peace. What he really wants to do is unite the world under him, and he wants to be God. So when the third seal is broken, we read in Revelation 6:5, authority was given to them over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword and with famine and with pestilence and by wild beasts of the earth. So by the time these four horses run their course, 25% of the world's population will be dead. 1 in every 4 people. Now, if it were to happen today, that'd be about 2 billion people. It's a lot of death. And you'll find out there's more to come. But just through those first 4 horses, as many as perhaps 2 billion people gone, dead, 1 out of 4. Now, the real tragedy here is, if just to put something else in your mind, the real tragedy is the Christians were raptured. They're not here. Yes, the gospel will be being preached during this time by the 144,000, which we'll learn about in chapter 7. And people will be being saved in the tribulation period. But this is early in the tribulation when about 2 billion people die. I mean, what's the chance that any more than like 5% of them had received Christ by that time? Well, there's no way to really know for sure, but logically, these are mostly unsaved people. So during the first 3.5 years, through those first 4 horses, 2 billion people, most of them lost, will be in hell in the lake of fire forever. It's a big thought if you think about it. It's a tragedy that doesn't have to be, but this is the wages of sin. This is what sin gives us. I should note here that all the judgments we will see are ordered by God. This is the time of his wrath. Yeah, people say, well, God would never do that. He's a God of love. Would he ever really do that? Yes, God is a God of love. He does love us, but he's also a God of justice. And were he to let sin continue forever, I don't know you could call him just. I don't know you could call him loving. There are limits to his patience. He forbears with us, has forbeared with us for a long time. But the time will come when his patience runs out, and he will direct the judgments that bring an end to life as we know it. 1 Thessalonians 1:9, Paul had something to say about this. He said, "For they themselves report about us what kind of reception we had with you, and how you turned to God from idols to serve the living and true God, and to wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead," that is Jesus, "who rescues us from the wrath to come." Now, I have marked down my next bullet point. This is more evidence that the rapture is pre-tribulation. So the wrath that's coming is the white horse, the red horse, the black horse, the ashen horse. And 2 billion people die. And Paul says here, we're looking for Jesus who will rescue us from the wrath to come. We found that in Revelation 3:10, that same concept, where he'll keep you from the hour of temptation that will try the whole world. So this is a little more evidence that the rapture is pre-tribulational. Now, I'm going to pause here just for a moment, and I'm going to open your mics in case you have questions. I'll give you the ability to open your mics anyway. So does anybody have any questions or comments? You've got to have questions. You just got to. Oh, you're lucky I can't see you. I'd be staring you down if I could see you.
Hello?
Yes, hello, who is it?
This is Carrie.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi there. Okay, so go back to that last paragraph that you just read, that this is more evidence that this is pre-trib. I'm not suggesting that, I'm not arguing with you or even questioning. I just didn't, how did you take that a little bit phrase by phrase there, if you would?
Sure. Carrie, we can just focus on verse 10,
Okay.
where Paul says, he first of all, in verse 9, he compliments them. He says, hey, remember, you guys were saved. You turned from idols to God. That's repentance. They got saved. And then verse 10 is what really kind of lays out the extra detail. It says, to wait for his Son from heaven. So the promise was when Jesus left, he told his disciples in John 14 that I will come again. So there's a promise that he's coming back. So These people got saved. They're waiting for his son to come from heaven. And then more description, whom he raised from the dead. That is Jesus. So there's no question about who the son is. They're waiting for the return of Jesus. And then it's the last phrase who says, who rescues us from the wrath to come. Now, I look at that, and part of the context would be the Great Tribulation is all about the wrath of God. Now, I'll take it both ways, Carrie. I'm taking it from the point of view that the wrath that Paul has in mind has to do with the wrath in the Great Tribulation. Someone could look at that and say, oh, Jesus saves everybody from the lake of fire. So I could see where it could be read differently. Is that how you're reading it?
No. I didn't put that together there. So no, not at all. I didn't have another idea. I was just, how did you get there? That's all.
Yeah, it's the last, what, 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yep.
5, 6. It's the last 8 words.
Yep.
Who rescues us from the wrath to come.
Okay.
And you connect that with Revelation 3:10. Where he'll keep you from the hour of temptation that's going to come upon the whole world to try those who dwell on the earth.
Okay.
And if you were here for that class, that phrase, those who dwell on the earth,
Right.
is used multiple times in the book of Revelation to describe the citizens of earth during the tribulation.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
Right.
that's where I'm getting it from.
Great. Okay, good. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, your mics are set up now so that if you want to turn your mic on and interrupt me, you can at any time. Okay, so Mark 13:8. More background, more prophecy from Jesus. Mark 13 and Matthew 24 are kind of parallel passages, one from Mark's point of view, one from Matthew's point of view. So Mark 13:8 says, for nation will rise up against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There'll be earthquakes in various places, and there will also be famines. These things are merely the beginning of birth pangs. Of course, one of the black horse brings famine. Okay, so far we've seen a false peace, a false deceptive peace, and now we see war unleashed on the earth, killing as many as 25% of the earth's population. Okay, so that's the white horse and the red horse. These are just the beginning of birth pangs, signaling God's ultimate triumph over sin, death, and the devil's ultimate defeat. Yeah, this is kind of one of the things that you have to follow. It's a thread you follow through the book of Revelation. The goal is God reclaiming the earth for himself and putting away this rebellion that started back in the Garden of Eden, put that away and down and away forever. The goal of the Great Tribulation is God pouring out his wrath, punishing sinners, literally destroying the earth, and it's about the defeat. So somebody has their mic open. So if you have your mic on and you don't have a question, close your mic if you would, please. So it says these are just the beginning of birth pangs. So Antichrist will be a key player in the judgment of war, as he was in the judgment of the false peace. So yeah, Antichrist was riding the white horse. He's heavily involved in the war as well. Daniel 9 gives us some more insight into this. In the latter period of the rule, when the transgressions have run their course, a king will arise, insolent and skilled in intrigue. Well, that's the devil. He comes to steal, kill, and destroy. He's very deceptive, and he has to be deceptive because if he ever announced what he wants to do to people, nobody wants it. So he's insolent and skilled in intrigue. So, and he is the Antichrist, the beast, is indwelt by Satan himself. So he's Satan incarnate. Verse 24 is power will be mighty. Yes, he has a lot of power. Not by his own power, he will destroy, but not by his own power. He will destroy to an extraordinary degree and prosper and perform his will. By the way, there's a mixture here of speaking of the Antichrist as a single person and the Antichrist as the incarnate house for the devil, shall we say, in the end times. He's indwelt by Satan. Meaning, when it says his power will be mighty, but not by his own power. So it's not by the power of the man who is the Antichrist, who is the beast. It's a borrowed power from the one who indwells him, Satan himself. He'll destroy to an extraordinary degree and prosper and perform his will. He will destroy mighty men and the holy people. And through his shrewdness, he will cause deceit to succeed by his influence. And he will magnify himself in his heart, and he will destroy many while they are at ease. He will even oppose the Prince of Princes. See the capital P on the first prince? That's Jesus. He even opposed the Prince of Princes, but he will be broken without human agency, meaning that he'll fall under the weight of his own evilness. Oh, and not to be forgotten that all the things that will be coming down on mankind in chapters 6 through 19, there seems to be no end to the war and slaughter that begins with the second seal. So I think this is true of all this. It's certainly true of me. It's certainly true of everyone who was born and raised in the United States of America. We've never lived in a war-torn area, but there are people in the world who have lived through wars. It would think of the First and Second World in Europe. They lived through the tearing down of their cities and the destruction of so many people. So during the Great Tribulation period, not only are there going to be judgments falling from heaven and upon the earth and the vegetation and all that, but there's also going to be like this constant rumble of war where people were by this time, by about that midpoint of the tribulation, all order has been broken down. A lot of governments have fallen. And when there is no government, people become their own law. You have these vigilante tribes, warlords that rise up and try to take control of a certain region. So that's going to be going all around the people of the world. Can you imagine trying to raise a family in that mess? Just trying to survive in that mess. So we read about a lot of the judgments, but things that we kind of figure out on our own that are happening are really devastating as well, because not only do people have to put up with the sun scorching them and some of the waters turn to blood and sea life dies and boils appear on people, all that kind of thing. But then there's also this threat of war. Somebody's always out to get you. They're going to take your things and they're going to harm your family. So it's a horrible, horrible thing. It's what sin does when it runs its course. So while people are starving, being attacked by diseases, by animals, being subjected to earthquakes and pestilences, there's this ever-present danger of war. And the war might not be nuclear war, worldwide war. It just might be these little vigilante tribes in every area, every town, every part of a town. So may God have mercy on those who do not trust him, because people that are living in this time, if they don't trust Jesus, their last 7 years on earth are going to be a living hell, and then they're going to face eternal judgment after that. So we need to have mercy. That's why I say, may God have mercy on those who don't trust him. Verse 5, when he broke the third seal, I heard the third living creature saying, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard something like a voice in the center of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not damage the oil and the wine." So I commented on this before. So the third seal is a black horse, and the black horse represents something that often follows war, famine. Yeah, when an area is torn up by war, sanitation systems break down, governments break down, trash pickup, and it just goes on. Everything that all the infrastructure that we count on is often gone. And because there's been so much war and death, agricultural production is down. So you face a food shortage. So famine often follows war. Matthew 24:7, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There'll be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. So the rider on the black horse also has a weapon of sorts. It's not a sword like the rider on the red horse. It's a scale. Okay, so the white horse, ridden by Antichrist, he had a bow but no arrows. He conquered by an idea, world peace. Then we had the red horse. The rider on the red horse had this huge sword to make war with and cause destruction with. We understand that. The rider in the black horse, his weapon is a scale. Okay, so how is a scale a weapon? Well, the scale will become a common worldwide tool used to limit the amount of food you can have, and that is in fact a weapon against the hungry. There's a guy that's attending our church now. His name is Bill Parks, and he has spent a lot of time in Cuba as a missionary. And I was speaking with him, and he was describing what it's like to be a Christian in Cuba, or any citizen of Cuba. I mean, what happens? They get a monthly ration ticket, and their ration ticket allows them to get from the government. I'm going to say it's 2 quarts of rice for the month, and then so much of this and so much of that. But it's really not. And he says it's really not enough to sustain a family. So there's a big black market in Cuba that it's illegal, but the government lets it go on because it keeps the people alive. So there's a big black market where people barter. Maybe you have a skill you can trade for food this month, but the Cuban government, communists, use the scale to measure out how much you can have of each commodity for that. So that's what's going to happen in the Great Tribulation. The rider in the black horse is a scale. So since the world has been at war, food production is down. It'll have to be rationed. It has happened before in our history, and even more in world history. I don't know if you remember just last year, probably last April, when there was shortages of things like toilet paper was the big one, but there were lots of other shelves. I go into the local grocery store and I never saw them bare before, and they were bare. Now, it's not like there wasn't any food in the grocery store. There was, but it was a little disconcerting to see how quickly those shelves could become bare. And we ought not to assume that those shelves will always be full, because there's a high probability they won't be. Hopefully we won't live through that, but it could happen, it really could. So food production is down, food has to be rationed. And I heard something like a voice in the center of the 4 living creatures saying, 1 quart of wheat for a denarius and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. Do not damage the oil and the wine. So if there's a voice coming from the center of the 4 living creatures, that voice has to be God's, because those 4 living creatures surround the throne. So what? Well, so what is another reminder that God is behind all the judgments as he takes back the earth. It's a time of unprecedented horror, a time that you'd want to avoid at all costs. It's a necessary time that God is going to orchestrate. Remember, the goal is he's taking back the earth. And we saw tonight at the end of chapter 5, how the host of heaven, John in his vision, they were so happy this was starting to happen. Now that it's happening, there's nothing in it that makes you happy unless you understand the outcome of the 7-year period, where it's the putting down of evil, putting down of Satan and sin. It's God's ultimate triumph. Okay. Any final questions or comments before we close for tonight? I love you guys. I really do. I appreciate you meeting with me on Thursday nights. It's a pleasure. It's a joy to be your teacher. Let me close in prayer. Lord Jesus, I pray for those on the call tonight, Lord. I pray that your presence, Lord, will become even more real to them tonight. I pray, Father, that you would bless them and use them. I pray, Lord, you'd fill them with your spirit. I pray, Father, that tomorrow as they get up, Lord, I pray they'd rejoice in just being alive. And Father, I ask that tomorrow would be a blessed day for them. Give them opportunities tomorrow, Lord, to speak about you, to serve you, and to glorify you. Bless them, Father, as we say goodnight in Jesus' name. Amen. Hey, God bless all of you.
Thank you, Jim.
Oh, I'm sorry, Carrie. Carrie, you have raised your hand. You can turn your mic on.
No, I was just saying thank you. That's all.
Oh, that's what the hand raised was. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bless you. Hi, Jackie. God bless.
Thank you. Good night.
Good
Good night,
night.
John Boy. Good night, John Boy. Is that appropriate?
Yeah. Good night, Tom Boy.
Very nice.
All right.